Jainism calls to mind monks and nuns, naked ascetics, mountain retreats, silence, fasting. But the locus of Jaina tradition is also to be found here in busy towns and cities, in the midst of the commercial clatter of each day of the week, where laymen and laywomen take time to worship, to study, to hear the preaching of the monks and nuns concerning the meaning of life and the path to salvation. Among the religious responses to the Brahmanical orthodoxy of the early Vedic period, the period of the 6th and 5th centuries BC, when the Upanishads were first circulated, was an order of naked ascetics who wandered in the area of northeast India. They venerated certain superhuman beings called jinnas, conquerors, those who had conquered the dilemmas of existence and had transcended the human condition. Those who sought to follow these conquerors called themselves Jainas. These great beings, these conquerors, were known as Tirthankaras, ford makers, those who had made a ford or a crossing possible for others, a crossing over the troublesome, chaotic stream of life. Jaina tradition recognizes 24 such Tirthankaras from the primordial time, the age of Adinatha, the first lord, down to the hundreds of thousands of years later when Parshvanatha, the 23rd such Tirthankara, appeared, and tradition regards him as living in the 9th and 8th centuries BC. And when we consider his successor, Vardhamana Mahavira, we have an historical figure that the community takes as an exemplary model for human life. Let us see how the modern Jaina tradition understands the life of Lord Mahavira as such a model. Mahavira is seated upon a celestial throne, the sacred insignia of the Tirthankaras marked upon his chest. In his life there are 5 great moments: his conception, birth, renunciation of society for the forest, enlightenment, and his final liberation. Depicted here is the conception, the descent of a divine fetus from a celestial region where he had been a god in his previous birth to the womb of Queen Trishala on earth. She dreams of 14 auspicious symbols: a great white elephant, a white bull, a white lion, the goddess Sri Lakshmi, and 10 other symbols that herald the arrival of a Tirthankara in this world. At the birth of Lord Mahavira, Queen Trishala becomes universal mother, and the world is flooded with light. All of the manifestations of the goddess come to pay respects to the Lord, and all the gods, including Indra, come to bow before him. The first rites take place with the baby on the lap of Lord Indra, while other deities pour water ablutions upon him, offer gifts, and wave lamps. The baby receives the name of Vardhamana, the increasing. Prince Vardhamana grows into a boy as fearless as he is handsome. His courage is tested in numerous crises, as here, at the age of 8, he catches and hurls away a dangerous cobra, which has threatened him and his playmates. In another episode, the prince is carried off by a gigantic monster. But once more, Vardhamana's extraordinary strength is shown as he pummels the monster and yanks his hair until Vardhamana is released. Now the gods call him Mahavira, the great hero. On the first appearance of the prince among the scholars of his community, it becomes apparent to all that Mahavira is himself the embodiment of wisdom and has no need of formal instruction. Eventually, Mahavira reaches manhood, marries, and has a daughter. and Mahavira's parents, in their waning years, undertake the ritual fast to death, and Mahavira himself, now free of obligations to his parents and restless in the soft householder's life, desires to take the renunciant path and seek enlightenment. Here, as he approaches the age of 30, he applies to his sorrowful elder brother for permission to become a mendicant. Mahavira, in a grand procession to which even the gods have come in spirited numbers, takes leave of his wife and family, his royal heritage, his home and community. He gives away all his possessions, and when he reaches the forest, he pulls out all the hair of his head and body and takes solemn vows of the renunciant. The 5 vows to refrain from injuring any living being, to refrain from lying, from stealing, from possessing anything, and to observe celibacy. For 12 years he wanders freely in North India, meditating and undertaking severe austerities as a naked ascetic. He never stays more than a night in any village and breaks his wandering only for the 4-month rainy season. Here, deep in the forest, the gentleness and interior strength of Mahavira subdue a deadly cobra, and the cobra, chastened, renounces his violent ways. Standing motionless in deep meditation, the Lord demonstrates that self-control which is impervious to fire and cyclonic winds, wild animals, snakes and scorpions, and perhaps most dangerous of all, the amorous glances of beautiful women. Not one of the attacks by jealous gods succeeds in reducing him to ordinary humanity. In the 12th year of his renunciant life, after a long fast, Mahavira accepts food after conditions of an elaborate vow that he has made are at last fulfilled. Finally, in the 13th or great year of his forest wandering, meditation and lengthy fasts, Mahavira goes into the highest meditative state and attains the 5th and final degree of knowledge. He is now an enlightened one, a venerable one, an omniscient being, one who has conquered existence. This is the 4th great moment of his life, and the event is celebrated by the construction of a vast 3-leveled assembly hall to accommodate the entire world, animals, men, and gods, who come to hear the Lord speak. And Mahavira, seated under the cosmic tree and facing all directions at once, shares his saving knowledge with all beings. After hearing his message of salvation, many become disciples. Here, 11 Hindus, all learned Brahmanas, are initiated into Mahavira's order. Mahavira walks from village to village, preaching his sermons and establishing religious communities. But rivalries arise. A former disciple of Mahavira, named Goshala, comes to curse Mahavira with his fiery powers. But the magical heat simply circles the calm form of Mahavira and returns to destroy Goshala. For 30 years following his enlightenment, Mahavira teaches his disciples, gains new converts, and guides the order. Then, in his 72nd year, after a preparatory fast, he preaches his final sermon and becomes a completed soul, a liberated one, having destroyed in that moment the last remaining tie to existence. The 5th and last moment of Mahavira's life has arrived, and a sorrowing community prepares his body for the funeral. He sits upright, still the teacher, his palanquin on the pyre, and the community witnesses the departure of Mahavira, the last Tirthankara. This romantic life of Mahavira is reminiscent in structure and detail of the life of Lord Buddha, and in some of the motifs at least, to that of Lord Krishna as well. And it is entirely possible that in the 6th century BC North India, there was a common store of such heroic and founder traditions. Mahavira lived about 540 to 467 BC, and outlived by a few years his famous contemporary Buddha and his less famous contemporary Goshala, once a disciple of Mahavira, but one who left to found his own order of naked ascetics called the Ajivikas. This is an extraordinary period in the history of religions, a period when disenchantment with the inconsequential life of this world is overcome by an enchantment for some sort of permanent state of bliss. Vedic man, if he had any complaint about this existence, was inclined to say that it was not long enough, that this abundant and joyous life was too brief. But not so with many in the 6th and 5th century BC social and intellectual ferment of North India, when there was a decided disenchantment with the inconsequential nature of life and a longing for some transcendent state of reality. And these transcendent states became the basis for soteriological systems, so-called heterodoxies in India at this time. Now, unlike the Buddhist tradition, which did not believe in the existence of a self, the point of departure for Jaina doctrine is with the jiva, the soul, as that Sanskrit term might be translated. There is an infinite number of such jivas, naturally pure, potentially free, but there is a problem, and the problem is that there is the state of samsara, the cycle of births and deaths, that is transmigration, and the cause of this cycle is karman. Now, this is not the karman of early Vedic religion, that ritual action by which man assumes responsibility for the life of cosmic forms, nor is it the abstract aggregate of human responsibilities which determine an individual's rank in the cosmic order, as in many Indian philosophies. Rather, Jainism invokes a materialism here, for there is a belief that the karman comes upon the soul in a process as subtle but very real atomic particles to cloud over or obscure the freedom of the self. And this process is asrava, or influx, whereas the annihilation of this karman, nirjara, is the process of elimination by which the soul is freed and permitted to float up like a pure, shining bubble in freedom and up to the state of isolation or kaivalya, the equivalent condition of nirvana. Now, this liberation, this emancipation, is accomplished not by a supreme being, for there is none such to help, but by the individual's lonely struggle in a discipline, carrying out penances and austerities upon the renunciant path. Now, Mahavira, like the Buddha and Goshala, lived and taught in Magadha, in the area of the modern state of Bihar, and there he spoke the local language Magadhi. The order subsisted for some generations until about the 4th century BC, when a split arose, the result of a famine which forced a number of Jainas southward into the Deccan under the leadership of Bhadrabahu, whereas a number also stayed in the north under the guidance of Stula Bhadra, and apparently relaxed the discipline to the extent here in the north of wearing clothes. This split crystallized in the 1st century BC into the two major sects as they are known today. The Digambaras, those who literally are sky-clad, who go naked, and the Shvetambaras, those who wear white. A third sect, the Stanakavasis, arose in the 17th and 18th centuries as a reform movement, attempting to remove those Hindu accretions which it considered to be compromises with Jaina doctrine, namely image worship and Hindu temple and festival routines. The concentration of Jainas today is in the 5 western states of Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. The population is today 2,600,000, but when we compare that figure with the vast Hindu majority, we see that it amounts to a scant 0.5% of the total population of India. Let us go now to visit a Shvetambara temple in Maharashtra, the state with the largest Jaina population in India. Architecturally, this temple reminds us of the Hindu temples of the region, but it is the occupants, the images of the temple, the objects of reverent attention who are different, for these are the Tirthankaras and famous disciples. Men, women, and children come any day of the week to worship here, paying respects first to Lord Parshvanatha, to whom this particular temple is dedicated, or to Lord Mahavira on the opposite side of the temple, before entering the main shrine room. These three laymen have come on this weekday morning, one wearing a mouth cover to avoid harming small insects. Since one must bathe and dress in clean clothes before worship, many Jainas maintain lockers in the bathing section of the temple. This layman comes at least once daily to perform his careful pujas at each and every image in the temple. Others sit in silent meditation in the inner sanctuary, where women are also found, usually gathered near the entrance, their chants and recitations blending in with those of the men. Young girls and older women alike create as an act of worship elaborate designs on the floors, making of colored rice powders the auspicious mantras and symbols of the faith. Just as in the Hindu tradition, Jainas divide their worship patterns between home and temple. Homes have shrines with images of the Tirthankaras, manuscripts, and illustrations of the saints and sacred words. Meditation, chanting, and recitation of the Tirthankaras' names are all practiced by devout laymen and women in their homes. And again, as in Hinduism, temple worship is mostly a matter of individual, reverent attention paid to the images installed in the temples. Daily temple puja consists of circumambulation of the temple 3 times before entering, recitations and meditations, and offerings to the images of various gifts, flowers, fruits, incense, sandalwood paste, rice, sugar, and the waving of a lamp before them. No cooked foods are offered, as may be done in Hindu temples, nor are any offerings taken back by the devotee as prasada. There are few distinctions in doctrine between the two major sects, but some traditional differences do exist. The life of Mahavira, for example, is regarded as the celibate monastic ideal by the Digambaras, so they do not believe that he married and had a daughter, but rather took his monastic vows at the age of 8, not 30. Digambara images are unclothed and their eyes are lowered in meditation, while Shvetambara images, such as these we see here, have loincloths indicated in the stone carving, eyes that look straight ahead, and much in the way of ornamentation. The officiants in Digambara temples are always Jainas, whereas Shvetambara temples often employ Hindu Brahmanas as attendants or pujaris. And Brahmanas may also be employed for certain domestic rites, following the traditional Hindu ritual texts. There are community celebrations, such as the New Year festival of Mahavira's birth, and a day of procession for the sacred scriptures, and days of worship for the symbols of the faith. Some Hindu festivals have been adopted as well. Diwali, the festival of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and fortune, has been homologized by the Jainas to the day of Mahavira's liberation. Jainas, many of them merchants and businessmen, favor this festival above all others, and we recall that traditional reluctance to injure life has restricted the Jainas to a narrower range of occupations, as there are beings alive in the earth, in water, in plants, agriculture, and many other professions are thus considered harmful to life. Pilgrimages are undertaken to the famous temples in Gujarat, fasts of all sorts, at least 2 days in every month, or variously 5 or 12 days a month, are undertaken too. Interestingly enough, some Hindus come to worship in Jaina temples, and this lady with covered mouth has been coming daily for 12 years, but she is still regarded as a Hindu, not a Jaina devotee. An intriguing illustration of the easy compatibility yet distinctness of the two traditions. The core of the faithful is the monastic tradition, and it is the Shramana, literally the one who exerts himself who strives on the difficult path to renunciation and eventual isolation, the monk or the nun who is that core. The laity, the laymen and laywomen, are themselves divided into degrees of approximation to that celibate monastic ideal. And it is they who undertake the nourishment, the sustenance of the limited physical needs of the Shramanas. The Shramana undertakes that difficult ideal of ahimsa, non-injury, non-killing, which Jainism, supremely of world religions, has taken as its banner. It is he who undertakes to withdraw from the killing of life, the violence of life, and to reduce, as far as is possible for him, the destruction of living beings. And so he undertakes the renunciant path. This 13-year-old boy has been a monk for a year, and he is equipped here for his 8th-month spell of wandering, carrying his sacred texts for study and recitation, his staff and broom, a woolen shawl, and his 2 bright begging bowls. Like Mahavira, he may stay only a single night in each village, then move on. But during the 4 months of the rainy season, when contact with water might injure living beings in that water, monks and nuns remain stationary in monasteries and hermitages. This quarters for monks is located next door to the temple. The spiritual leader, or mahant, of this monastery is seated here with 2 respected monks. All 3 are scholars, well versed in the canonical literature of the tradition and fluent in the several languages of the widespread Jaina populace. Since they are mobile for 2/3 of their monastic careers, they become astonishingly skilled in the languages and subcultures of India. Every day in this temple there are philosophical discourses presented by the monks, sometimes lasting for 2 or more hours, but always well attended by the laity. Nuns of all ages are part of the Shvetambara tradition, and here in their quarters across the street from the temple and monastery are an 8-year-old and a 90-year-old who are stationary for the rainy season. The nuns also preach daily to groups of laywomen who crowd their quarters for the long sermons. The stationary season is an opportunity for systematic study, and the monastery has an excellent library. A young Shramana studies Sanskrit texts with an older monk. He is 24, has been a monk for 5 years, during which time he has walked at the rate of 6 or 7 miles a day over much of western India. He has learned all of his Sanskrit, Prakrit, philosophy, and other subjects while a mendicant. I found him to be a most gifted scholar, as thoroughly dedicated to the intricacies of Jaina metaphysics as he is to his monastic practice. Although teachers outside the temples, monks and nuns do not enter them, nor do they recognize any image worship. Strict routines divide their days into periods of study and meditation, public confession, and the practice of austerities. One such austerity, demonstrated for me by these monks, laughingly to show that they found it quite painless, is the tearing out of hair by the roots, which must be done completely at least once a year. Fasts to reduce the injury to beings are undertaken regularly, for a day, a week, or partial fasts for a year or more. The ultimate religious statement of fasting, of course, is the death fast, which may also be undertaken by the laity. While wandering, a monk or nun begs 1 meal each day unless he or she is fasting, and accepts whatever food is offered. Sometimes families undertake vows together, as in the case of a 50-year-old department store owner in Bombay who decided to become a monk, and his wife, 4 sons, 2 daughters, and 2 nieces all took vows together a year ago. He is shown here with 3 of his sons and his 8-year-old daughter, who has unwrapped her woolen broom with which she sweeps the path free of vulnerable insects and lays out her meditation seat. This family wanders in groups, the mother with the younger girls, the father with the minor sons. As the father said to me, "I did not wish to have my family stay in the tragedy of this life. It is wonderful that they have all consented to take the vows." The attention that is given to the intellectual side of the tradition, both meditative and discursive, is one of the most remarkable features of Jainism, and once again calls to mind the teaching dimension of Mahavira's career. Educational institutions maintained by the Jainas are among the best in the nation. Libraries and publishing houses are prized accomplishments. Books are widely circulated. And as in medieval European Christianity, it is the monastic tradition which takes on much of the responsibility for preserving the intellectual heritage. As one text has put it, learning is a treasure that needs no safeguard. Nowhere can fire destroy it or proud kings take it. Learning is the best legacy a man can leave his children. Other things are not true wealth. People speak of high birth and low, mere words with no real meaning. Not property or ancient glory makes a man noble, but self-denial, wisdom, and energy. Far out of proportion to their small numbers in India today, the Jainas have made significant and lasting contributions to the history of civilization in South Asia. Contributions in architecture and sculpture, such as in the great rock-cut temples of Ellora, or in the soaring towers of the Khajuraho temples, or in the experimental flat-roofed temples of Belgaum, or contributions such as the great Colossus, the statue in Shravana Belgola, and contributions in medieval art, too, in the miniature paintings of that period. Contributions in literature and in philosophy. But perhaps more significant than all of these is the spiritual presence of Jainism today, a presence in an increasingly secularized modern South Asia, the presence of an ideal of self-control, of compassion, of conquest. Not the conquest of aggression or domination over others, but the conquest of the self, the taming of the self. As we have seen in reviewing the tradition of the Tirthankaras, they go back to the primordial time. And Mahavira is not the founder then of the tradition, rather he is the most recent of these enlightened beings. But I have stressed his role because it stands as an exemplary model for all beings who are in the process of evolving. And it is still the model of Mahavira that inspires men and women today to give up all that they have gained in this world and take up the renunciant, the monastic tradition. And it is still the model of Mahavira, who came this way 2,500 years ago, that inspires this boy to leave home and seek and further his salvation upon the varied roads of India.